our skin or where we come from or what our background might be. Because, obviously, if you're white, then there's something wrong with you that you have to solve. So goes the statement of the critical race theorists. I don't care if it's old school, and I don't care if it's politically incorrect. In this country, everyone ought to have the opportunity to succeed. I don't care what color you are, where you come from, what you believe, or who you love. America should be a place where everyone is welcome to make their contribution. And the fact that you might be white does not make you a bad person in the United States of America. Yes, ma'am.
That, the Equality Act, as my daughter, Haley, went to school on a soccer scholarship, girls soccer scholarship, I'm sorry. And as you know, it's time to just really eliminate that with men deciding that they want to be women and run in that. I used to never have soccer. Now I have a granddaughter who's also on the track team. And same thing is from South Carolina.
So the question is about the attack on women's sports that we see going on right now. And I don't get this. When I was in school, it would not have been viewed as a positive thing if the boys wanted to play girls' sports. That would have subjected you to ridicule, and perhaps rightfully so. But now it's more than a joke. It is a deprivation of opportunity for women. My sister got a great deal out of women's sports. She played softball at Choctawhatchee High School, and it gives young women a sense of agency and ambition and self-esteem that's really important. And I don't understand why more women in America aren't fighting against this transgendered agenda that doesn't really seem to be about treating people fairly and honestly, but about shifting the whole matrix of how we design athletic competition and employment. I don't think anybody should be subject to meanness because they're transgender. I think we should be nice to everyone. But that does not mean that we should have men dressing up like women in the women's bathrooms, in the women's locker rooms, and taking spots that should be reserved for women in sporting and athletics. Yes, sir.
What about closing the Mexican border and coming up with a real immigration policy?
The question is, what are we doing about closing the border and coming up with a real immigration policy? I actually thought Trump had immigration right. We should evaluate immigration based on whether or not that immigration is beneficial to our country, and to not be sorry about that. And by the way, immigration is a strength of our country. We have a lot of immigrants in this community that make our community stronger, and I'm glad we have them. They should come legally. They should follow the law. They should learn English. Don't care if that's politically incorrect. This is a country where we speak English. I think that's an important part of saying that you want to be an American. When my son came over from Cuba, first thing he wanted to do was learn English. And I think that's a great thing. So, one, finish building the wall. Second, reignite the Trump asylum reforms where we get rid of catch and release. And if you have an asylum claim, you can make that claim. And we're the most generous country in the world when it comes to asylum, but you can await that claim in your home country or in a safe third country, not here in the United States of America. And then I do think we need to look at specific areas where we need immigrants to come do jobs legally. The problem is when they come illegally, they're getting paid under the table, and oftentimes they're suppressing wages of our fellow Americans. So a legal immigration system where we start from the proposition that we don't do immigration to help other countries or to help other workers, we do immigration to help our people. Yes, sir.
Term limits. How many terms will you be running for?
That's a great question. So, on the issue of term limits, the question was a personal one, and how long I intend to do this job. When I was running, one of the competitors I was running against made a commitment that he would not do less than 4 years if elected, and he would not do more than 8 years if elected. He ended up not being able to do any because I won. But that seemed about right to me. I think if I'd have left you after just one term, you would have felt like I went up there, got a cup of coffee, and didn't really do all I could to fight for you. But I think when people stay for, 10, 12, 14, 28 years. It's problematic. And so I'm not going to be a lifer in this job. I do not expect to serve more than 8 years in this job. I might not serve more than 6 years. I served 6 years in the state legislature, and I've been elected to serve 6 years in Congress. That might have a nice ring to it. But here's the problem. It's all the good ones that leave, and it's the worst ones that stay. I mean, Maxine Waters isn't going anywhere. She's going to stay. Adam Schiff's not going anywhere. He's going to stay. And people like, who leaves? People like Ron DeSantis, who go and do their 6 years and then go find another way to make a contribution. And so I struggle with this issue because I don't want to be a lifer. Little personal news, I'm recently engaged, so I'm kind of excited about what life might hold, in marriage and fatherhood and all those things that I want to pursue. But I will not be here for decades. I likely won't be here for 1 decade. I think that 4-year to 8-year range is the sweet spot. So I hope you'll forgive me if after another term or two, you guys just find me hanging out down at the boathouse having a shrimp salad. Great. Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? No, just give me a little praise. All right, raising the roof back there.
Right here.
Yes, ma'am, in the black and white shirt.
So I'm sorry if you already said this because I did come up a little late, but fake news. So I had to hunt to find anything accurate. I was getting called an extremist and a conspiracy theorist, but I brought up Biden's son's laptop back during when we were doing elections.
Right.
And that will be resurfacing. I know I don't want the government to control news, but is there any front on trying to get it less biased? I do know there's Newsweek and
Newsmax, yeah.
But it's just, I even see other Republicans that are my age that's for this, but they're still believing that Biden really won and that the government, that the country really wants this liberal agenda because that's what's getting sold to them. And I will not lie to you. I can tell you the only reason I critically think is because my parents made me. In school I was told to shut up and color, and guess what my generation does? We shut up and color. So it's kind of scary for me. I'm actually scared because I don't know where this country's going.
The question is one of fake news and information that is either put out or, in your case, suppressed. I mean, remember when the New York Post put out the story on the Hunter Biden laptop, and it was like big tech, big media, everyone swooped in and limited that so that people couldn't consider it in making their vote. I do not believe that the government could ever be trusted to ascertain truth and falsity and to deliver that in a pure way. I've been in government now for over 10 years, and I don't trust them with the truth. And so I think that more than ever, the obligations of citizenship really impose upon us the necessity of review and critical thinking, like you said, and comparing sources. I tell folks, don't just look at conservative news. I think we have an obligation to take it all in, to review it, to know what all the sides are saying. And you know what? Sometimes we can learn from each other if we have disagreement, or we can become more enlightened. I mean, I remember in politics where it was like, oh man, if you changed your mind on anything, you were a flip-flopper. You could never be trusted by the voters again. And there are issues where my own opinion has been informed by the facts, where I've gained more research, and where I've tried to do better as your congressman or as your representative. And so I just think that in today's era of fragmented information, so much fake news, so many media organizations wanting power, we just have to be ever the more diligent in comparing sources, reviewing the information, and finding the truth. Because ultimately, the truth will set us free. You know, the truth is ultimately what preserves and saves America. And this isn't China. You know, the gentleman earlier made the point about censorship. In China, the technology companies and the government are all in one. And every human in China has a social credit score attached to them. So imagine if what the government thought of you, or what technology companies thought of you, impacted where you lived, where you could work, where your kids could go to school, your access to religious services or financial institutions. And I worry that the cancel culture might be coming for finance next. What happens if, well, we saw that you posted an America First post, so now your mortgage interest rate is going to be different, or your credit score will be different, or your ability to borrow money to start a business might be constrained. That's why we have to hold firm. We cannot just let our country float away as we retreat to the recesses of our own thoughts. We've got to be willing to share those thoughts, review information, and speak the truth. And that is what I try to do each and every day as your congressman. Yes, ma'am, with the mask around her chin. Careful, man, you just made a gun-pointing gesture. You may be labeled an extremist before this town hall is over. The question is, what are we going to do to protect our Second Amendment rights? As I'm here with you, the ruling party in Washington, D.C. is strategizing on how to subject law-abiding gun owners to even more hurdles and even more restrictions to be able to vindicate the rights that our founders gave us. One thing that I think is just so important in this battle is educating people on the actual purpose of the Second Amendment. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me when I hear liberals say, well, you don't need an AR-15 to hunt. Now, those people clearly have never been hog hunting in Texas, but leave that aside. The Second Amendment is not here for hunting. It is not here for personal protection. The purpose of the Second Amendment is so that, if necessary, the people of this country could maintain an armed rebellion against the government. Now, you can like that, you can dislike that, you can argue for reformation of that, but that is what it means. And I think that the first thing we've got to do to protect our rights is to understand why they exist in the first place. And I think if we did a better job of that, we would be having the debate on more equitable terms. But I do not believe that any community becomes more safe if you restrict the rights of the people who are following the law. The people who break the law are going to break the law. And I don't think that those of us who want to follow the law should be left unarmed in those circumstances. I could tell you that my sweet mother here has recently become a gun owner, and she is an excellent shot. Yes, sir.
All this is good. You talked about a constitutional convention, but where's the accountability in the now? If we have laws that say this is what the immigration law is presently, where's the accountability for those who are violating it up to the executive branch?
Yeah, the question is, well, when people are breaking the existing law, what is the mechanism by which we hold them to account? And you specifically referenced the border. Well, I mean, here was the problem when we had control. We had unified control of the government. When you all sent me to Washington, we had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency. We could have taken the asylum reforms that Trump championed, and we could have put them in law. But Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan wouldn't fight for them. So Trump had to do it by himself. He had to do it by executive order. And the frailty with that is that the next president, with just the stroke of a pen, can reverse it. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did. And so when they reinstitute catch and release, they don't break the law. They are the law. One thing that's troubling me, though, is the conduct of the Biden family. You know, there was a recent report, very credible, that when Hunter Biden was engaged in potentially a gun crime, the Secret Service went behind him and cleaned it all up. Now, I think Donald Trump probably regrets having Michael Cohen as a fixer, but he never used the Secret Service as a fixer. And more, the Biden family seems to believe that the Secret Service, the Department of Justice, that they're all there to cover up their crimes and to target the people that criticize them. And, you know, I've spent a lot of my time in Congress doing oversight of the Department of Justice, and it's like they're the Department of Injustice more often than not. And like, in Washington, I think most people get that the agencies of government, they want to become more powerful. There's no person that's like a deputy secretary of a Washington agency that wakes up and says, I really hope my agency has less authority and less power tomorrow. They all want more. And so how do you grow power? Well, you help your friends and you punish your enemies. And like, if you're at the Department of Labor, that's scary enough. But if you've got a gun and a badge at the FBI or the Department of Justice, it's even more troubling. And before anybody labels me a conspiracy theorist, They tried to do that when y'all first elected me. I was the first member of Congress to call the Mueller investigation a total sham and to call for it to be disbanded. And now we see how fake it all was. The FBI had a lawyer literally changing evidence to try to, entrap or incarcerate people who were close to Trump, hoping that that would create pressure on them to tell lies and ultimately destabilize our country and the presidency. So just because these folks in Washington, D.C. have fancy titles and work for entities that we view as credible and august, you cannot always believe them because they're just like everyone else. They want more power and they're willing to cheat to get it. Yes, ma'am.
When does Trump come back? Because we voted him in, and this was stolen, and a lot of these questions would be answered if we had our rightful, chosen, elected president. And Biden is not our president.
Well,
he's not our president.
He is the president. Joe Biden is the president, and I know every day because I'm not welcome in the Oval Office anymore. So that's how I know there's a different occupant there, because I used to spend a lot of time there on your behalf. The question is, when is Donald Trump coming back?
April 1st.
I hope that he is the Republican nominee in 2024 for president. I hope he runs again, and if he does, I'll vote for him. And I'll endorse him, and I'll campaign for him. But Donald Trump will not be president a day before January of 2025. Yes, sir. Thank you for asking this question. I'm sick and tired of the United States Capitol being like the new forever war. It's like an occupied city up in Washington, D.C., and I resent it because you got politicians that are using our guardsmen and women as political props. And it's insulting, and it's hurting communities, and really it's hurting the Guard at large, because there's actually really important work that the Guard's supposed to be doing, whether it's vaccine distribution, disaster response. Frankly, we probably need the Guard to put down some of the civil unrest that is still happening in some parts of the country. But we do not need the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and we do not need a U.S. Capitol that is wrapped in barbed wire and crisscrossed in barricades. I've seen the intelligence reports. There is no intelligence that justifies the current force posture in Washington, D.C. And you know what? I'm glad that our governor, Ron DeSantis, said we're not playing this game anymore. He recalled the Florida Guard back home, and a bunch of other Republican governors followed his lead. And ultimately, that's going to be what we have to do. Yes, ma'am.
I know that recently another congressman put out a letter to request the end of the Federal Department of Education. What do you think the chances of that happening are?
I am one of 3 co-sponsors of legislation to abolish the Federal Department of Education. I do not know a single teacher in America who wakes up and says, thank goodness there is someone at the Federal Department of Education creating paperwork for me to do. The Federal Department of Education is an 8-story building that encompasses an entire city block in Washington, D.C. People go in and out of it every day, and not one of them educates a child. Not one of them assists a principal. Not one of them is there ensuring that we've got additional school nurses or mental health professionals for our students. They create paperwork so they can then leave government service and consult on how to comply with the crazy paperwork that they've created. I would abolish the entity, I would rent it out as commercial office space, and I would give all the power of education back to the states and to our local communities, because that is what the Constitution requires. That's not like my personal preference alone. There is no constitutional role for the federal government in education. And so I would just get rid of it. Yep, yes, sir. Oh, great point. The gentleman raises the point of the Nancy Pelosi effort to literally steal a congressional seat. Marionette Miller Meeks won an election in Iowa. It was certified, and now they want to get rid of her. And they're dead serious about this, by the way. Here's just how I'll put it. Nothing should be off the table for the Republicans if Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats simply try to expand their power because they can. But, doesn't it feel to you like sometimes they fight harder than we do? That's what gets me. Like, when they have power, they'll do anything to maximize that power and to shape the country in their vision. Remember when COVID first happened, and one of the Democrat leaders, Jim Clyburn, their whip, said, we have to use this as an opportunity to remake the country in our liberal view. Whereas, like, as Republicans, we're always trying to play patty cake with a rabid pack of wolves up there. And so what I try to do personally is I try to inspire more of the Republicans to have a little fight in them. And it's hard because when you act like I do, when you say the things I say, when you are unchained and unbridled, then they come for you. And, folks say, well, gee, Gaetz, you represent the Florida Panhandle. I can't do all that because, maybe my district's a little more purple. And so I try to be an example on how to actually take the fight to the other side. And in this particular case, I don't want to detail out the whole strategy, but I don't think anything should be off the table. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Here in the House Armed Services, I appreciate your service. There's two bills, HR 303 and 333, that just been sitting on the shelf. You're a co-sponsor. Is there any chance those are going to be heard, debated, whatever? It has to do with veterans and veteran disability, veteran pay, and taxes.
Bills regarding veterans and service members often don't get their own dignity. They're not voted on individually. What happens is they either make it or fail to make it into our yearly National Defense Authorization Act. And so what we try to do as members of the committee is assign our name to those bills through co-sponsorship to try to get them into those big bills. And so we'll...
They've been this way since 2003.
Yes, turns out Washington doesn't move very quickly, and this is an interesting dynamic I did not really learn until recently. If you're a Republican, it's very hard to get on the Armed Services Committee because a lot of Republicans want to be on the committee because we want to do right by our military and our veterans and our service members. The Democrats oftentimes have a hard time even filling their slots on the Armed Services Committee because their members want to be on the Education and Labor Committee because they want to go sell out to the unions, right? That's where they get their bread buttered. And so it is going to be harder now than during Republican control to get big things done in the National Defense Authorization Act because that's not really where the Democrats want big things to happen. They want big things to happen to erode the integrity of the vote. They want gun control. Exactly, the centralization of political power in H.R. 1. And so I would be less ambitious about those bills this year than in prior years. Yes, sir.
I don't understand why there's not enough power behind everybody to stop this fossil fuel and then stop completely, and then 100 people died in Texas because they didn't have fossil fuel to keep themselves warm.
Right. The question is about sort of the forever war on fossil fuels. And the Biden administration's efforts. I think, sir, you might have been referencing the Keystone Pipeline cancellation, which was just nonsense. It feels like with the Biden government, it's all about virtue signaling. It's all about, well, we did this to please a particular group, not necessarily because it was the best thing for the country. And the gentleman, I think, correctly pointed out that there are real consequences when we do these things with life or death, with people who are unable to get what they need, and in this case, energy, to keep them warm. Yeah, people died. And I think the question was, why aren't there enough of us to sort of push back against that? And where I think we need more courage is in the Republican caucus in the Senate. Because senators have the power to approve or not approve the nominees that the Biden administration puts forward. And frankly, we should be holding Joe Manchin's feet to the fire if there are people who want to make energy more expensive and who want to make our country weaker as a consequence. We need all the Republicans to hang together, and then we need to pick off a Democrat or two from states where energy actually matters to people.
I can say, look at the price of gas right now. It's already going up to $3.
Hey, listen. You have nothing to complain about the price of gas in Florida. My fiance is from California. I think you have to sell a kidney on the black market to fill your car up with gasoline in some of those places. So at least in Florida, I think we've got a more common sense approach. Casper.
If Governor DeSantis has opened the state of Florida, why have I got to go online or sit on hold for 30, 40 minutes, an hour, just to get an appointment to go in a tag office and renew my tag? When are they going to open up the state office?
Yeah, so the question is about opening up some of the municipal and county service offices. We don't make those decisions in Tallahassee.
I know you
we
don't.
make them locally here, so
Yeah.
I'll give you the number of my good friend Ben Anderson, the tax collector, who I love. But I recently, if you were in the Niceville tax collector's office on last Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, you may have seen me there waiting for my appointment.
Yeah, why can't we get it open?
I think you need to call the tax collector.
We
Casper.
have.
You strike me as very persuasive, and after 30 or 45 minutes, you may speak to him. Yes, ma'am.
That's right.
Wonderful. Well, what's the secret? How did you raise her so right?
Well, my mother was part of the John Birch Society, so I go way back. And her grandfather is a veteran, has told her that if she voted for Mike, she'd find another place to live.
Well, we've now found the secret. It's taken us, about an hour of our town hall, but the secret to saving America: strong mothers and grandmothers. Oh, listen, I remember when I first ran for this job, I was running against the guy who said, you can't vote for Matt Gaetz because he's a mama's boy. Which is totally true. I'm proud of it, and I love all the mamas and all the mama's boys that are out there. Yeah. Let's see. Ma'am, go right ahead. We'll do one more question.
My question is, please explain to me how the House can impeach Trump on doctored evidence and there be no accountability.
The question is, how can the House of Representatives impeach a president on faulty evidence, doctored evidence, fake evidence, and then there's no real accountability? Well, there are a whole lot of Democrats who voted for that impeachment who lost elections. You saw that Democrat majority really shrunk down, and I think the reason is because folks out in the country rightfully said, well, gosh, while you were doing all this stuff with impeachment, what were you doing for me? And I honestly struggled with how much of my own day was dedicated to impeachment. I didn't run to be your congressman because I wanted to go be an impeachment defense lawyer for Donald Trump. I ran because I wanted to fight for our military mission, our environment, our way of life, a better economy, lower taxes, regulations that were right-sized for our lives. But so much of my effort was consumed in this, but I just thought, well, if I don't do it, then, you saw what some of the other Republicans did. We needed to fight for it. And so the accountability is not one that politicians will ever visit on one another. It's something the people have to visit onto the politicians. If folks aren't fighting for you, and in the case of a lot of these other districts, people felt that way, they make a change and vote for someone else.
Republicans left and right, but I've yet to see one Democrat go on the chopping block.
Well, and that there is sometimes a bloodlust for that vengeance that I feel. Sometimes you just sit there and think, man, the double standard, and if they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all at times. And you think, well, gosh, they've wronged me, and so I owe them, a little return fire. And I worry about our country if that is the sole dynamic. They violated the law and the spirit of the law and the rule of law with these phony impeachments. And I don't want to be in the phony impeachment game. I want to be in the better ideas game. I want to be in the stronger country game, and I want to advocate for the policies that actually bring us together. And that is really the secret of the Trump movement that the media never understood. The Trump movement wasn't different for men and women. It wasn't different for people of different races or different geographies or different religions. It was an invitation to everyone. make America great again. Let's be a stronger country for everyone. And so, I don't want to give them the satisfaction of focusing too much on them. They suffered from Trump derangement syndrome, and their party, I think, is weaker as a consequence. And while Donald Trump is not in the White House anymore, there are people who still believe in these policies and will fight for them. And by the way, he does too. I still talk to the former president a great deal, and he has not dialed out one bit. He is still every bit as engaged as ever, and I believe there will be a rebirth of our America First movement, that we will be stronger than ever, and that we will be the patriots that deliver victory for another American century. Thank you all so much for coming out. Connect with us on social media. Let's keep up the fight.